So we'll make a start with tonight's session. And continuing on from last week, thinking about the practice of refuge. And we've discussed the causes of refuge, and then we're going to discuss the objects of refuge. So I suppose we'll start with the prayers like always. So setting our correct motivation, thinking to listen to the Dharma and think about the benefits of taking refuge and what we take refuge in, so we can become a Buddha to liberate all sentient beings from the ocean of samsara. So with that in mind, and visualizing the space in front, Shakyamuni Buddha, surrounded by the lineage masters, and surrounding you are all sentient beings, and think we're acting as the chant master and leading them all in the prayers. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfect complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha and over the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfect complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha and over the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfect complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha and over the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Then the mantra Shakyamuni Buddha. Tayatha Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgati Bodhi Soha. Tayatha Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgati Bodhi Soha. Tayatha Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgati Bodhi. Sorry, the passage mantra. Was that the mantra Shakyamuni? Tayatha Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Maha Munaye Soha. Tayatha Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Maha Munaye Soha. Tayatha Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Maha Munaye Soha. And then we recite the praise of the perfection of wisdom and the mantra. So the inexpressible, inconceivable, indescribable perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing, the nature of space, object of the uniquely known transcendental wisdom, to the mother victorious ones of 3 times, I prostrate. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Soha. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Soha. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Soha. And then the mandala offering. Is that a short mandala? Oh, Sashivohi Yoshi Oh, Travigali Nidegembali Sangye Shindu Mitewa Dukunam Doshina Chopasho Jetsun Lama Tampa Kinam Ki Choku Kara Tree Jesus Sampe Zimala Zavye Choki Sapa Padu So Itaku Vanamanda Nitayam. and then Refuge first. Sangye choram soni choram la janshu badu dani kyapsu chi dagi chuni gibe sonangi wala penchi sangye drupa sho sangye choram soni choram la janshu badu dani kyapsu chi dagi chuni gibe sonangi wala penchi sangye drupa sho Sangye Chudam Soni Chonamla Jancho Badu Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chuni Gipe Sonamgi Dola Penchi Sangye Dupa Sho. Okay, so we'll begin today by briefly recapping what was discussed last time when we think about the causes of refuge. So what causes us to take refuge is considering the suffering of the impermanence of this life and how we will die and our time death is uncertain. And then the way our next rebirth is dependent on our karma. And then we consider how all of samsara is in the nature of suffering. And these propel us to think about taking refuge. And then we think, okay, I don't want to suffer in samsara anymore. What do I need to do to be free from this suffering? Well, then we think we need to rely upon a valid person, someone who is free from samsara themselves. And this does require sort of faith in the beginning. And then with time, you start off with maybe a blind faith and then more of an intellectual faith where you begin to understand the teachings in an intellectual sense. Then you start to apply them and meditate on them and really feel the benefit, and you are truly convinced that this is the right path. So then the object of refuge. So the object of refuge is 10 different ways of presenting them. So if we consider the common Mahayana vehicle, and the Bodhisattva Yana, there are two sort of refuges: the causal and the resultant. So the causal refuge is in the Buddha Shakyamuni, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel. And then the resultant refuge is our own potential to possess, to be a Buddha, to possess a Dharma jewel, to possess a Sangha jewel. So then, what actually are the three jewels? So we kind of take a step back and we begin with the causal refuge. So the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha is a being who is free from samsara. So in the ornament of clear realization, so not the ornament of clear realization, the sublime continuum of the Mahayana, or the Gyulama by Maitreya and Asanga. The first chapter discusses the object of refuge. And then in verse 4 it says, I bow down to the one without beginning, middle, or end, who was pacified, who through Buddhahood awakened to enlightenment, who upon enlightenment revealed the fearless and permanent path, so that those who had not realized it might do so, who carrying the supreme sword and vajra of knowledge and loving kindness slashes the sprouts of suffering and destroys the wall of doubt with its surrounding darkness of obfuscating views. Then continuing on in verse 5, 6, 7, and 8, it says, uncompounded, effortless, not realized by other conditions, endued with knowledge, loving kindness, and ability. And endowed with the two welfares is Buddhahood. It is uncompounded because its nature is without beginning, middle, or end. It is effortless because of having pacified Dharma body. It is not realized by other conditions because it is the object of realization of oneself. It is knowledge because it has realized the three aspects. It is loving kindness because it shows the path. It is ability because it abandons suffering and afflictions to exalted wisdom and compassion. The first three qualities fulfill one's own welfare, the latter three fulfill the welfare of others. So then, kind of briefly explain this. So we say that the Buddha is permanent. the Buddha is there throughout the beginning, middle, and end. There's no inherent beginning, middle, and end, but the Buddha is always there. There are kind of two ways of considering the permanence of Buddhahood. One is in that Buddhahood is irreversible. Once you've attained this, it's impossible to fall back to samsara. So in this way, Buddhahood does not actually depend on causes and conditions because it's not a compounded phenomenon, it's a permanent phenomenon. But also, you can consider it permanent because this is the nature of the Dharmakaya, this nature of emptiness. This is kind of an absence. There is no afflictions to be found because if it's an absence, it's then not a functioning thing, it's not a compounded phenomenon. So then we look at the effortless, uncompounded is the natural purity of the mind. Effortless refers to how all Buddhas just act spontaneously. They know exactly what deeds need to be done for each sentient being without any kind of concern, thinking, oh, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? Then we cannot really understand a Buddha with conceptual mind. So that's why they are not realized by other conditions. And then the two welfares that the Buddha possesses. So we say that the two welfares refer to the truth body, the wisdom and nature truth body, and the form body, the Buddha's body and the Buddha's mind. Then it has the three. Yes, we say here that in the 7th and 8th verses, it says it is knowledgeable because it has the three aspects. It is loving kindness because it shows the path. So it is not realized by other conditions because it's the object of realization of oneself. So these three relate to the welfare of ourself. Whereas the second three, the ability, the compassion, because it is ability, because it abandons suffering, affliction through exalted wisdom and compassion. These three qualities relate to the welfare of other sentient beings. That because you have wisdom and compassion, you know what to do. Or because you have compassion, you want to benefit beings. You have wisdom, you know what to do, and your ability, you're able to do it. So you work for the benefit of all sentient beings. Then, according to Padre Rinpoche, in his instructions on refuge, he describes the Buddha as one endowed with the four kayas and the five wisdoms. So the four kayas, the svavika, the nature of phenomena, nature of emptiness, the dharmakaya, the aspect of wisdom of the Buddha's mind, the sambhogakaya and the nirmanakaya, which are kind of the bodies of a Buddha. And then the five wisdoms, the wisdom of dharmadhatu, the sort of wisdom of mind, the emptiness, the purity of the emptiness. The mirror-like wisdom, so it's the sort of unceasing clarity. The equalizing wisdom, which is a complete abandonment of attachment and aversion. No one near, far, any kind of distinguishing like that is free from being present in a Buddha's mind. Then we have the wisdom of discernment. So the Buddha just knows all objects as they are without any kind of confusion. And then the all-accomplishing wisdom, which effortlessly brings about the welfare of others because the Buddha just knows what to do to benefit beings. So in this way, that's what a Buddha is. And then we think, well, why do we take refuge in the Buddha? Well, we take refuge in the Buddha because he's taught the path. He's, giving us all these presentations of what to do. He's set an example. He went through the deeds and he became a fully enlightened Buddha and he turned the wheel of Dharma. So without the Buddha, there's just no path. He's the teacher that guides us. And then moving on, we have the second object of refuge, the Dharma. And the Dharma jewel can be divided into two. So there's the Dharma of scripture and the Dharma of realizations. So the Dharma of scripture is the three baskets, the Vinaya, the Sutra, and the Abhidharma baskets. And the realizations are the training in higher discipline. So it's the basically the Dharma of realizations is the three higher trainings, and it relates to the three baskets. So the first, the higher training of discipline, relates to the Vinaya basket. The second, the higher training of meditation, relates to the Sutra basket, or the Sutta Pitaka. And the third, the higher training of wisdom, relates to the Abhidharma basket. Then within these jewels, so this is very important, right? We don't just think about keeping one aspect of the Buddha Dharma alive. We the lineage line has emphasized it's important we receive teachings on the Vinaya, the sutras, and the Abhidharma. We don't neglect the Vinaya in favor of sutras, and we don't neglect the Vinaya and the sutras in favor of the Abhidharma. We need to have all three present to purely maintain the Buddha's teachings. And if we want to benefit beings in the future, we need to make sure all these are preserved. And that's why it's important to receive all transmissions. So then, kind of in terms of realizations. So we see that the Dharma realization of the first, the Vinaya, the realization of conduct, of morality, according to Sandong Rinpoche, he's explained that just holding the monastic vows means you have the realization of the high training of discipline in your mind stream. So compared to the others, it's a lot easier to hold the Dharma of realization of Vinaya, of discipline in your mind stream. Then when it comes to the high training of meditation, that's in possessing these states of calm abiding. And for wisdom, it's this realization of emptiness. That's the kind of realization aspect of them. So if we then go back to the Gyulama, the Dharma jewel, it says, I bow down to the Son of excellent Dharma, is inexplicable as not non-existent, not existent, not existent, and non-existent, not other than existent and non-existent. So we see here that this is referring to the Dharma jewel is the teachings on emptiness. They're just a conceptual mind cannot understand them. We need this direct perception. Then it goes on to say, is devoid of description, is known by oneself alone as an Arya and is pacification. With the undefiled radiant light rays sustain us exalted wisdom. Dharma subdues attachment, anger, and obscuration with regard to all objects. So we say that the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, the purpose of the Dharma is to subdue our afflictions. Anger, attachment, and aversion. So that's why amongst these, the teachings on emptiness is supreme because it cuts. So we say that the teachings on patience can be used to pacify anger, but cannot be used to pacify ignorance. However, the teaching on emptiness pacifies ignorance and all other afflictions. In that way, it's supreme. So then it says, inconceivable, free from the two, non-conceptual, pure, clear, and antidotal class. That which is and that which there is separation from attachment. The Dharma is endowed with the characteristics of the two truths of cessation and path. Separation from attachment itself is included in the truth of the path and the truth of cessation. These two in that order shall be understood through their three qualities respectively. Inconceivable because of being unanalyzable and inexpressible and known by the Aryas. Peaceful because it being non-conceptual and without the two. And being the three, pure and so forth, it's like the sun. So you can relate the Dharma jewel to the Noble Truths. But in essence, by taking the three trainings, the Dharma of realizations into our mind stream, into our path, into our practice, we just abandon the afflictions and we progress along the bhumis. We go through the realms and paths of the Buddha. And then this takes us to the truth of cessation, the complete abandonment and realization. So we see this is why the Dharma is a valid object of refuge, and it's the key object of refuge because it's a method to attaining enlightenment. And then the Sangha Jewel. So the Sangha Jewel refers to the Arya Sangha. So those who have realized emptiness, they're irreversible, they cannot fall back now. They're not completely enlightened Buddhas, but they are not controlled, or they cannot completely fall back into samsara. They've got this direct realization of emptiness. And then according to Patrol Rinpoche, specifically the Bodhisattvas are our object of refuge. And because of their direct realization of bodhicitta, they cannot fall back to the vehicle of individual liberation. The Sangha Jewel, again in the Gyu Lama, is defined as the mind is in the nature of clear light. They perceive the entitylessness of afflictions and therefore perfectly realize the pacification of the extreme of selflessness of all migrators. I bow down to those who perceive complete Buddhahood in all, who are endowed with an unobscured intelligence, who have the realization of exalted wisdom that holds as its objects the purity of infinite living beings. So again, here we're seeing they have the sort of realization of emptiness. And then when we say the mind's the nature of clear light, again, this can be viewed in different ways. You can take it from the aspect of sutra, where it's the mind being free of stains, so it's clear and knowing. That's the clear light nature of mind. It's free of stains. There's nothing inherently stained about the mind. And then you can also think about the tantric perspective, so in the Vajrayana, where the clear light mind is this pure nature of the mind. Yeah, but that's kind of where we'll leave that there. And then the next verse of Gyu Lama says, because the perceptions of realizing modes of varieties and inner knowledge is pure, the assembly of the irreversible intelligent ones is endowed with unsurpassed excellent qualities. So here it says, this is referring to the Sangha Jewel, and the modes refer to the emptiness of inherent existence, the varieties refer to knowing individual objects, inner knowledge. Yes, we're saying, so realizing the emptiness of inherent existence of sentient beings refers to modes. Realizing the different sentient beings is the varieties. And that's what's being referred to here. This is what these Arya Sangha possess. But you can read more in the commentaries on the Gyu Lama. It's quite clearly explained what's meant in these verses. If you want to sort of study them, it's very good to receive teachings on the Gyu Lama. So back to the object of refuge then, and the taking a refuge. So you can see the Sangha Jewel is very key because we need people who are more advanced than ourselves to help us progress along the path. So we then take refuge in the Buddha as the supply and teacher, the Dharma as the supply and method, and the Sangha as the supply and support on the path. So the Dharma realization. So we can kind of see therefore that we've looked at the causal refuge and then the resultant refuge. The resultant refuge is the refuge in ourselves that we will become a Buddha. The refuge in the possessing the Dharma jewel in our continuum. This means we have the realizations of the Dharma jewel in our continuum. So the realization of emptiness, realization of calm abiding, and then the sort of realization of morality. So this is possessing Vinaya vows. It's not very clear to me from the commentary I received. They said Vinaya, Geshe-la explained it was the Vinaya vows. I think this can actually mean any of the Vinaya vows. So the vows of a fully ordained monk, fully ordained nun, a Gelong or Gelongma, a Jetsul or a Jetsulma, a novice monk or a novice nun. The 5 lay vows of a layman or a laywoman, and those kind of ones, but I don't think it includes. And then you obviously have the bodhisattva vows as well there in the Vinaya Pitaka and so on. So holding these vows means you have that realization. And then you become a Sangha by having this, continuous this related to this realization of emptiness at the same time. So that's the three jewels. But then we also can think of, you see, there's that outer and inner refuge. Sorry, the causal and resultant outer refuge. But then beyond that, we also have sort of the inner refuge and the secret refuge and so on. So these inner and the secret refuge are the uncommon methods of the Vajrayana, and it's quite good to briefly cover them. So you see, you have the outer refuge of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the inner refuge of the Guru, Yidam, Dakini, or the Guru Deva Dakini, the secret refuge in the Salung Tigli, the channels, the winds, and the sort of essences, the drops. And then you also have the ultimate refuge in Dzogchen of the three aspects of the mind. But in brief, we'll cover the inner refuge because it's quite important if you enter the Vajrayana path, and even in a lot of the preliminary practices, you take refuge in the three jewels, the three roots, and so on. There's a refuge verse by Dujom Lingpa who starts with taking refuge in the three jewels and the three roots, and then the Sa Long Tigle. So here it says, according to the Yutok Chatwa Choying Vanro, so he lived sort of the late 18th century, mid to mid 19th century. The late 19th century to mid 20th century. And he wrote extensively on the Longchen Yingtik Mudra. So there he says, we offer our body, speech, and mind to the Lama, who is the source of all blessings. We rely upon the Yidam deities who arise in infinite peaceful and wrathful forms out of peaceful state of the Dharmakaya and the source of all siddhis. We take as our companions the wisdom Dakinis, who course unimpededly throughout the unborn space of reality through the force of unceasing compassion and the source of eliminating obstacles. So then these refuges are the kind of key. The guru is equivalent to the Buddha because he's the teacher of the path. The Yidam, the Deva, is equivalent to the Dharma because it's through the practice of the Yidam we attain enlightenment. And then it's through the Dakini, the support, we have the blessings to have the realizations of the Vajrayana path. So that's the way that the objects that we're going for refuge in. The Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are the key. And a lot of my lamas have said, as much as we kind of think, we practice Dzogchen, we practice High Yoga Tantra, we cannot forget the root of the Dharma is Shakyamuni Buddha. Karmalunda Rinpoche really emphasizes it, that without Shakyamuni Buddha turning the wheel of Dharma, there'd be no one to have turned the wheel of the Vajrayana, there'd be no one to teach Dzogchen. This is all kind of related. We need Shakyamuni Buddha to have been and turned the Dharma. So we can't forget the sutras. We need to remember Shakyamuni Buddha there. So then, now we've discussed the object of refuge. You can think, okay, this is what I want to take refuge. Brilliant. When I now know what I'm doing and who I'm taking refuge in. So then, when we take refuge, you select the verses, the San Yeshua Soni Choram, that verse, for example, and you think, okay, kind of setting an intention, like I'm going to do this. You're thinking, I'm going to place my trust entirely in the Buddha, entirely in his teachings, and I'm going to be supported by the Dharma, the Sangha. So the causal refuge is placing one's hopes in the three jewels. You know, they'll bring freedom and from samsara. And the resultant refuge is then placing one's hopes in the fact that one day I will become a Buddha. This is a much more profound kind of refuge. It's in our own Buddhahood. Thinking I will manifest these states in my mind stream to free myself and all sentient beings from samsara. Then it says in the commentary to Longchenpa's Semni Nyalso, Finding Comfort and Ease in the Nature of the Mind, it says, in this regard, according to the vehicular characteristics, the wish to attain the ultimate Dharmakaya and realize it is one's mind is the resultant refuge. And to take refuge in the three jewels as one guide until this has been attained, thus creating the causes for its attainment is the causal refuge. So you can see we start with the causal refuge, we think about this, and until we have this attainment, we have this belief. And the wish to attain this is the resultant refuge. So these are key, and this is what we're practicing. So then we've taken refuge, we think, okay, I'm taking refuge. So there's kind of, according to Patrol Rinpoche, there's kind of differences in refuge. So the jewels are the same, but he says the duration of taking refuge varies. So it kind of states that Mahayana have a slightly different duration of refuge. So because we tend to combine refuge with the renunciate, refuge with bodhicitta, then it's kind of continuing on until you attain enlightenment. Whereas if you don't have it combined with bodhicitta, it's just for this life. And this because in the Vinaya vows, you see, when you take any vows of the sutra, the individual liberation vows, whether monastic or lay, they end at the time of death. Whereas the bodhisattva vows continue on life after life. You don't necessarily need to uphold them in the next life because you don't remember, but it creates the cause to take them again in the future. So then we've taken refuge. You can see we're now at this point of wanting to take refuge. We now know the objects. So you think about why we're taking refuge. You've now developed the wish to take refuge. You know the objects we're taking refuge in. You take refuge through it's not just reciting the prayer, but it's actually changing your mind to take refuge in this way. And then you have the sort of commitments of taking refuge. They're not necessarily vows in the same way as like the lay vows, not to kill, not to steal. It's the commitment of refuge, the three things to be avoided, the three things to be practiced. And then there's sort of 5 general pieces of advice. So the 3 things to avoid. So the first is, having taken refuge in the Buddha, we should not take refuge in worldly gods. So all non-virtuous friends, non-Buddhist teachings, and so on. Non-Buddhist teachers, so not thinking that the teacher of another tradition can lead you to enlightenment. Not in another tradition to say, just because of a Zen teacher, not a Tibetan teacher, or a Theravada teacher, but thinking like the teachings of Islam, for example, or Christianity will lead you to full enlightenment. Those kind of teachers that teach these paths. Or just taking refuge in worldly gods in general, thinking, let's say something happens and your life's at risk. You shouldn't think, oh, may Brahma protect me, may Indra protect me, may God, in a kind of Christian sense, help me. You should think, maybe the Shakyamuni Buddha help me, or Tara help me, and so on, these kind of things. And the second thing to be avoided is having taken refuge in the Dharma, One should avoid harming any being either directly by oneself or indirectly by making others do it. So again, this is the kind of teachings of non-violence. We don't directly harm beings, and we don't. Then we can't get around it by thinking, well, I can't harm them, but I'll just tell them to go and punch that person. It doesn't work like that. And then the third to be avoided is having taken refuge in the Sangha. One should avoid entrusting oneself and keeping company with negative friends. So people who will discourage you from practicing the Dharma. It normally says those who hold extreme views. But often in the West, it's not easy to avoid it's not saying you have to avoid all these people at all times. And this comes up in the Bodhisattva vows and the Tantric vows as well. But it's saying it's not spending so long with them that you begin to doubt the Buddha's teachings, that you begin to think maybe there is an inherently existent self and so on. And then what's to be practiced? So the first, having taken refuge in the Buddha, the mind of respect, we should regard even statues as actual Buddhas. And we should pay respect to statues. We shouldn't place them on the ground and so on. And then it says, having taken refuge in the Dharma, one should pay homage and respect by generating the recognition of all scriptural texts, or even just one syllable of the teachings as being the sublime Dharma. So, we should treat Dharma texts with respect. We shouldn't put them on the ground, or you shouldn't sell them, for example. There's a story of he was in Solukhumbu in Nepal, sort of on the way up to Everest. There was a sort of person who wrote very nicely, and he made these great collection of sutras. And then at one point, I think this was in the 1950s, maybe 1959, as they were leaving Tibet, they were undergoing great difficulty. So to make sure he could feed his family, he sold these sutras, and then gave them the money that was then gathered from selling these sutras was then given to some monks who came to his house and recited prayers and so on as an offering. And then afterwards, all these monks got sick. They said it was kind of a pollution from selling the Dharma, from this person selling the text. So we should be very careful in this way. And then third, having taken refuge in the Sangha, we should regard even one member of the Sangha as being the actual Sangha. So it's about treating the other Buddhists with respect, whether monastic or lay, whether ordained or lay person, should treat them with respect. And sort of in a more general sense, you see this like for statues, it's important we respect even damaged statues. And with scriptures, we should respect if it's been torn, it's just a fragment of a sutra. It just contains this much of the sutra. You should still treat it with respect. And then there's the story of a piece of yellow cloth or a piece of red cloth from monastic robes. In Tibet, there was people who would pick them up off the road and think, oh, we're going to respect the Sangha ritual, and put that in a high and respectful place. And then the 5 general precepts. So first, we should not abandon the Dharma. You don't forsake the 3 jewels, even at the cost of your life. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to say it's good not to joke about, this also applies to joking about abandoning the 3 jewels. It's still not good to do these kind of jokes. Then okay, so there's some variation here between what Lama Zopa Rinpoche has and what Patrul Rinpoche has. So Patrul Rinpoche says, do not forsake the 3 jewels even at the cost of your life. Even in important ventures, do not seek other methods. Do not interrupt your regular practice. Encourage yourself and others to take refuge and pay homage to the Buddha of whichever direction you travel. Whereas Lama Zopa Rinpoche has wanted to rely upon holy beings, listen to the holy Dharma, and follow the Dharma and practice it. So they're the same. The first one's about not abandoning the 3 jewels. And then the second one, he says, one should not let one's senses become excited and take as many vows as one is capable of keeping. One should have a compassionate attitude towards sentient beings. When eating or drinking, one should make effort to offer to the three jewels, should train well in the refuge precepts. And then I'll just check the other text. Yeah, and then Chucky Rapper, the launching intake master, says the three things we adopted, three things we abandoned, and three supplementary precepts. So the first is taking refuge in the Buddha. We abandon taking refuge in worldly deities. Having taken refuge in the Tao, we refrain from harming other beings, and having taken refuge in the Sangha, we don't associate with those who hold wrong views. So those are the same to all three. And the same with what's to be. Yeah, so the what's to be abandoned and adopted is the same. And then for the three supplementary precepts, it says the supplementary precepts rely upon your spiritual master and practice without doing anything that violates or conflicts with his body, speech, and mind. Listen to the teachings and follow the Dharma and Sangha. So we can kind of see there's a little bit of variation in general advice, but in general, it's all very similar. You don't abandon the three jewels. You don't rely on the things other than the three jewels to accomplish your spiritual aims. You practice the Dharma as much as you can. And then one key practice of refuge is you should renew your refuge every day. 6 times a day, so 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night. You should take refuge. And if you do a practice session in the morning, a practice session at night, that's enough. But it's good to just recall. It's like setting a motivation of bodhicitta throughout the day. We should just recall that motivation and think, yes, I'm going to do everything to become a Buddha to liberate all sentient beings. And this way, our entire life becomes controlled by refuge and bodhicitta rather than the afflictions. Yeah, so in this way, we can kind of see what to do when we take refuge and what not to do when we take refuge. And then I suppose the benefits of refuge. So again, the Dorukchen or Dorukchen Jimmy Nima, the student of the first Dorukchen Rinpoche, the third Dorukchen Rinpoche, this one, says the benefits of refuge. Taking refuge in the three jewels brings the immediate benefits of the three qualities of the higher realms, such as longevity, closing the door to lower realms, and so on. Ultimately establishes the foundation of the qualities of definite goodness. So yeah, if we take refuge, we're progressing on the path, and that's why we should do so. And then maybe leave it there so you can see we've now covered why we take refuge, who we take refuge in, what we do when once you've taken refuge. And the practice of refuge isn't just reciting the words like a parrot. You should think and taking refuge in the Buddha as a sublime teacher, taking refuge in the Dharma as a sublime method, and I'm taking refuge in the Sangha as a sublime support. So in that way, I hope that's of some benefit to everyone, and we'll dedicate the merit accumulated today. Nation Sampa Rinpoche Makye Panam Keyuchi Kipa Nyampa Mepa Yang Gong Ye Gong Du Pelwa Sho Chancho Sanjo Rinpoche Makye Panam Keyuchi Kipa Nyampa Mepa Yang Gong Ye Gong Du Pelwa Sho Tong Yi Tawa Rinpoche Makye Panam Keyuchi Kipa Nyampa Mepa Yang Gong Ye Gong Du Pelwa Sho Kami vawe kowe zingam so penan dewa malu yungwe ni chinwe zingwang tenzin gyatso ni Sapesite Badu, thank you, Chi. Kiwa continue and I went down to it. Rogi Changi Rojo to show. So thank you very much and see you next time.